Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lack of Focus. I'm sorry, an in focus for Lack of Focus, 40K for Noobs. So, in the previous episode 78 of Lack of Focus, we had kind of intimated that Sean had taken the deep dive into 40K with he and his son. And he said in our little group chat that I've got about 40 questions I want to ask. And I'm like, this is going to make fantastic content, but only in a 40K focus one, because I know I tend to ramble on about 40K all too often on the show. So we wanted to separate that out from the main show and do a little bonus for the Patreon page to kind of just be able to, we can kind of kick back and just feel comfortable wasting an hour and a half or 2 hours talking about 40K. So for those who may not have heard it in the main show, Sean, do you want to kind of give us a synopsis on how you made this dive into the game?
Well, so it all started with, I've always loved Warhammer Fantasy. I've only played it a few times, but I loved it. I loved the models.
A man of
taste. Played back. What's that?
A man of taste, Sean.
Yeah, it was, and I always loved the Bretonnians. They were my favorite, and all the horses and the archers and the
so someone had to. Yeah, you went up and then just dropped back down a little bit.
Drop back down. Yeah, I know. It's
that was the set that I bought too, Sean. That was when I got into Warhammer 40, the first game that I bought. I think I've been transparent about this. Is the first tabletop game that I bought was Warhammer Fantasy, and it was that box set that came with the Bretonnians. I was right there with you.
Bretonnians and Lizardmen.
Yep. Lizardmen versus Bretonnians. My friend Matt bought it, and then we went half on it in the end, and then I started building out all the beautiful, the knights, and I never got further than that first box. Matt and I played a couple times and then never really ever played again, but I had fun putting them together. And those were actually the first models I ever painted. I painted the archers green, white, and gold. Pretty cool. They look like crap, but for me, it was really cool to have that. And so about probably, I'm going to guess.
So before you move on, Sean, I just wanted to, just because of the show we're doing.
Yep.
I don't know about you guys, but one of the big hurdles I always found was moving from that starter box into wanting to play properly.
That's
was like trying to figure out like what's it called. I want this because it looks cool, but then finding out that I had to spend like $50 on a Codex or a Warhammer Army book.
Yeah,
or $90 on the model. There's
or the barrier for entry for just, hey, you've got this box full of models to put together.
Well, I'll be honest with you. That portion for me is never intimidating because it either happens or it doesn't. I buy a box and the models stay in the box forever, or start putting them together. That's literally it with me.
For folks who haven't gotten into a miniatures, like a lot of our audiences from the X-Wing community, so they came with these pre-painted, pre-assembled miniatures, but like legitimately you get this box of models, like, well, neat, what do I do with them?
Right.
You've got to get a pair of halfway decent, diagonal cutters to be able to get them off. You need to get the right type of glue. You need to be able to get a good, sharp X-Acto knife to be able to shave down like mold lines. Like there's all this other stuff. You're like, wow, like it's not just I buy this box and take it home and play it. It's I've got to put all these together. It's interesting to me, like for someone who would just be getting into that miniatures game might not recognize that that's something that's an additional built-in cost when you decide to get into the game.
The other barrier to entry is overload.
Yes.
So
especially in a game that's deep and as vast as both fantasy and 40K. Agreed.
Yeah. So I never understood, like when back in it had to have been mid late 90s, real early 2000s that my friend Matt and I got into that. And like I said, it didn't last very long. Matt's a very impulsive person, and he goes in and out of games that he wants to play pretty quick. And so then in the 2010s, I got back into it with a group of guys at the game shop where we were going in on Sunday nights and playing, and we were doing it pretty religiously. And I bought back into the Bretonnians, and I went head over heels to where I had probably I had probably $600-700 invested in it. And that's where, and we would play, and, it mattered who won and lost, sort of. It wasn't competitive per se, because we had a lot of guys that would just have trays, trays with dice in it rather than actual models, because they couldn't afford to buy the models yet.
Skaven army.
Skaven, yeah, the Skaven army, where they'd have 2 or 3 trays of Skaven, and they had maybe one tray full, and then the rest was all proxy and stuff. So that was kind of how we played. And then some things happened. I don't remember totally what it was. Something where we had to play with these other guys that wanted to play, and they ruined it because they're the really competitive guys, and they came in and just, they knew everything about it and were just crushing us. So we just said, well, we're done. And I actually had that whole army primed, to be honest with you. That was 100% primed. I was getting ready to paint it, and then that happened, and then that was the end of it for us. And part of it is, understanding all the rules and everything else. So anyway, Warhammer Fantasy was my first introduction into the true hobby gaming scene way back in the early 90s, late 2000s. So recently I've been thinking, well, Age of Sigmar,
that's the equivalent now.
It's the equivalent, and I have seen boxes where it's humans on horses. I don't like the humans on griffins. That's not my flair. I like the humans on the horses, and scouring Amazon and other sites and stuff, I did see that. And so anyway, so I was going to talk to my son. Literally, this was 2 weekends ago. It was 2 Saturdays ago. We were talking on the phone, and we hadn't gotten together. He comes over on Saturday about 11 o'clock, leaves between 3 and 5 on Saturdays, and we hang out, play games, or just, run errands together. Just good fathers. He's 26, and, so it's our way of connecting. And we talk during the week and stuff like that. And we're both gamers. He's more of a video gamer than I am, but so anyway, so I was literally that day we were talking on the phone, I was going to say, hey, would you be interested in, if I bought a starter set for Age of Sigmar, would you be interested in doing it? And he's like, and that was what I was going to ask him. And he goes, in the middle of this conversation, before I could ask him, he goes, guess what I did, Dad? And I'm like, what? And he goes, I bought into 40K. And I just started laughing because,
Yes.
Because it was one of those things where a lot of my friends play 40K. I don't know much about it. I play Martyr with you guys and stuff. So I know bits and pieces. I actually, I don't know. I'm sure I can say it now. I play tested. What was the
Conquest?
I did Conquest. I also did, what was the board game they came out with?
Chaos in the Old World?
No.
Horus Heresy?
No, it was, God dang it. It was the board game where you had the ships on the board and basically you're playing around the warp. I can't remember what it's called.
It was, I know what I mean.
I can't even think of it. I have it sitting down in my basement. It's a demo box down in my basement. But it came with all the models and all the cards. It's the old cards. So for me to play it, would have had to have print all the new cards, which I probably don't have. And then I did the Warhammer the card game that was based on the, God dang it, why can't I remember these things?
Warhammer Invasion.
No.
It's the 40K one.
That's Conquest.
That's Conquest.
Warhammer Quest.
Warhammer Quest. Yeah, I did both the alpha and the beta on that. So.
Yes, they ended up having to scrap it because they lost the license and transferred the game into a reskin, which is the Turnoff one now. Right.
Yeah. So I have actually the beta that I have of that and the actual game itself. So I have double the dice that you would normally have. Anyway, so I was talking about. So I have tiny bits. I knew the word Zinch and what it meant, and and all that. And, so there's things that I do know, things that I don't, just because of all
not
the games.
Tzeentch.
Yes. So he tells me that, and I'm like, it through my head, I'm just laughing. I start laughing, and he's like, "What?" And I go, "Well, I was actually going to ask you if you wanted to get into Age of Sigmar, but if you're doing this, let's do it
You're
together."
going to buy the new Age of Sigmar starter box anyway, Sean, a Dominion box. It looks fucking awesome.
It does, actually. I saw that, and I about...
When second edition comes out.
Yep.
Third edition.
Third edition. Is it third? They're up to the third edition already. Whoa.
Yeah. So anyway, so he's just laughing. He tells me, "Yeah, I've already bought the 1,000 Suns," and he sent me the link through the phone, and he sent me the link to the box set, and it has like 20 or 21 models and stuff. And I'm just like, well, would you mind if I bought into it too, and we could play? Because what it is two of his friends bought a bunch of the models, and they've never played before, but they wanted to paint and do all that type of stuff. And my son actually likes to paint. He's not very good when I actually paint, and now that I've had surgery on both hands, I can actually hold paint brushes again.
Yay!
Which is one of the things that's important for painting. So
yeah, kind of.
Yeah. So he's like, "Yeah, Dad, that'd be great if you play." And he's like, "What would you play?" And I said, "Space Marines, because A, they're to me the easiest thing to paint, and B, I like the human side of most games. And it's not that I'm xenophobic or anything. I just I like when they put humans into games. I love that lore that comes with it, and how basically how they can be almost anything you want them to be.
That's a good description of Primaris Marines. All right.
We could have been anything that we wanted to be.
So anyway, what's the first thing that I do? I don't totally talk. I told my son, I would talk to some friends, which he knows you guys,
I've met your son. He beat me at X-Wing.
Yes, he did. We're probably the only family that's truly beaten you at X-Wing, I think the list, though, you played against me was a setup just to let me win. But anyway.
You know me, Sean. I like taking suboptimal lists and seeing if I can win anyway.
Yeah, that was an interesting game we played. But anyway, so I'm like, well, so what do? I message you two, and then I start messaging Chris, and because I figured he might have a little more time to talk, and I think
I was at work whenever all this was going on, and I'm like,
I think you were
really want to get into this, but I'm soaked in meetings today.
Oh, we talked the night before that, I think, hadn't we? Because
it was the night before, actually.
Yeah, because
Ed was in the dark. Ed didn't know because I talked to you first, and then we brought it up in the D&D.
That's what it was.
Yeah, I think Jill was working in the evening, so I had to wait until I put Evie to bed before I could come and chat. So I was like,
we got on.
Yeah, it was easier to talk on Discord than to do it via text.
So we jumped on Discord, and I showed him the Vanguard Space Marine box for $85, 16 models. And Chris is like, well, hold on. Let me look at something. So he looks, and he's like, well, you can get the exact same thing with this vehicle for, whatever. And you're saving like $80 or whatever it was. And it's the exact same thing. And he's like, this comes out Saturday. And this was like what, Tuesday or Wednesday when we talked?
Something like that.
And so then the next day I talked to my son, and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do Space Marines. And I started showing him what I was going to do and stuff. And Chris was actually, when we were on Discord, was putting his screen up so I could see what he was talking about, and then we found the PDF rules, the 25-page PDF rules and all that. And which I never looked at because I knew already that I was going to go overboard with this. So anyway, so I talked to my son, and I'm like, hey, this thing comes out Saturday. Chris told me to go to the game shop, the local game shop that same week, and if he could get it so that pre-order it or get it reserved, because they're on allocation. And of course, I went there and they were able. I told them, hold the Vanguard box. If they're allocated and I can't get one, I'll just buy the $85 one. If I can get it, I would like for you to hold it. And they did. And so I got that, and I got the Intercessors with it that had just came out at the same time. And then I also bought the...
Did you just get straight Intercessor, or did you get combat?
I got the ones...
The normal ones. The
ones that came out.
The heavy Intercessors.
Oh, the heavy Intercessors. Ooh.
So I got a box of 5 of those, which I'll probably get another box to equal 10. Once again, I don't know enough about this stuff. This is where a lot of my questions come into play.
Sure. We'll get to those.
But so in the meantime, then I was at the store and we don't have any. I could throw out some 3D printed Legion terrain if I wanted to, or Legion terrain to give us terrain and stuff. So then I bought for $100 at the store. They had the Urban Conquest game system, and it comes with. What does it come with? It comes with some, ground terrain, stuff like that. So it's this ground effects terrain.
Ooh.
So for $100, I just got all that terrain, which
is that a new box? I usually keep it.
I don't know.
No, it's been out for a while. It's not in print anymore, though, I don't think.
I don't think either.
I've not seen that in a really long time.
I think we've got 2 or 3 left at Sentry Box.
Yeah.
If you want one.
But when you look at the cost of terrain, $100 for 10 or 12 pieces, even if they're small pieces, is a gigantic deal. That's where my son and I were talking, and he's like, "Yeah, that's a great deal," because we were looking at just other terrain that was similar size, like $40 for one piece. And
yep.
So I got that, and
that's if you go Games Workshop. There are other avenues.
No. This is this. Yes, I understand there's other avenues, but I'm trying to do it where I'm keeping stores alive rather than going to eBay or any of the other.
I think that means non-GW terrain, as in you can buy non-Games Workshop terrain.
Yeah.
More generic. Is that what you meant, Ed? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Yeah, no. That's exactly what I meant. So, for example, Gale Force 9 does these Battlefield in the box. They are pre-painted Battlefield pieces. I always go for those. Yeah, I go for the Gothic Ruins one. I have several pieces of those. Those are perfect for 40K, and then you literally, quite legitimately, open the box and put it on the table.
Yeah,
and it's done.
And I'm all for that too, because it's less painting I have to do. But I didn't really realize that at the time, and I needed to get my store card. They have a rewards program. I needed to get it above 250 points so that I could get 20% off my gigantic purchase that I made. So anyway, that day I bought the Combat Patrol box, the Heavy Intercessors, and then the Space Marines Captain with Master Crafted Heavy Bolt Rifle.
Ooh, there you go.
So I have a real leader and not just the sergeant that's in the box. And then once again, I really don't know anything about this or the characters or anything like that. And I've been waiting. So my son and I, after that, we went out to actually, I think on Friday, him and I went out to, because I took the Friday off and he had the Friday off. We went out to the Games Workshop store here in Omaha and talked to that guy. And we were able to pick up 2 core books. So we each have one. I wanted one and he wanted one, so he had it with his friends. And then I got the Space Marine Codex, the current one. And then we ordered the Ultramarines Codex so that I would have that. And I haven't started building because I'm waiting to get that before I do, just to see, yep. Chris has it.
Dad told us it's the old edition one. I've still not opened mine yet. Still sealed.
Yeah,
but it's still considered current. And so...
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing to me is it doesn't really matter if it's old or, whatever's current is current, and I understand because I played Warhammer Fantasy, how it works where codexes are updated with armies and new models and all that type of stuff. And right. I get it, and when the new codex comes out, I'll be buying the new codex when the new supplement comes out, when the new rules come out, because I'm just a collector like that. I love the pictures, and I'm not a creative person to where I would understand everything. So the pictures are really helpful for painting and things like that for me too, even though I have no idea how to do it. So
I dropped a link for you in our podcast crap to go and look at that Gale Force 9 stuff if you want to go take a look.
Yep. Yeah, I'll look at it.
Also available from the Central Box.
Just see. I highly recommend that Gothic line. It's perfect for 40K because it's just ruined buildings. And legitimately, Sean, you open the box, you put it on the table. They're heavy.
I know what it is, actually. I do.
Yeah.
The game shop does carry it. It's just I didn't even think about it at the time, but this was actually pretty cool to get that much.
Oh, that's cool too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I've become
$100.
Yeah, that's something I was leaning into. Is like I've become a bit of a terrain snob. Like way back in the day, I was looking up tutorials on how to make your own ruins out of like poster board and using straws to make it look like there's pipework. And I did those way back in the day. But then whenever I first started getting my first actual GW based terrain, and you look at that and you look at the poster board, or even like the 3D, the what am I thinking? The MDF board, the laser cut MDF board stuff.
Right.
You look at that, and then you look at all of the dripping skulls of detail that Games Workshop puts into their terrain. And I've just become I'm a gigantic GW snob. So like all of my terrain over time, I have rotated out all of that stuff and replaced it with Games Workshop stuff. So when I set up my table, everything with the exception of the Battlefield in the box, I still kept those. Everything except those, it's all GW terrain.
And that makes sense. Terrain to me is terrain. It's whatever a book is terrain,
It can be, but it so helps you get into the immersion of looking at your little guys shooting their laser guns in this really cool thing, and there's a skull on that building, and they're standing on top of this thing where ships land in. Like this is the reason why Games Workshop's in a billion-dollar business, because of guys like me. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh yeah. So getting into this, so I talked to Chris, and I'm like, well, point me in the right direction, at least get me started, on what I'm looking at, what I need to do. So he told me, the new stuff that was coming out, I couldn't find the Librarian. They didn't have that. So basically every day this week, I've been looking at Games Workshop site and, trying to get to the, figure out, what's the next step? Because this is the hardest thing for me is my son, he just sees it. He understands it. He buys it. He gets it because he reads through the books. He understands the lore more so now for his Thousand Sons than I ever do for Space Marines. And so, one of the things that Chris and I talked about was the purism. Is that what it was, Chris? What did you call it? About everything having to be the same.
So for me, if I was going to do a Primaris army, I couldn't, because I'd have to do 3 different Primaris armies because they're laid out by the different armor types. So you've got the full-boss armor that comes in the box. You've got the intercessor plate, and the Gravis armor is the heavy intercessor armor.
Yeah.
See, I'd go one step further, because again, so you're entering the game at an interesting time in that Primaris are really kind of we all thought they were going to be the replacements for basic Space Marines, basic Astartes. So
we didn't. You.
Okay, I did. I thought that's where they were going. So there are smaller Marines, which are the Adeptus Astartes, and then the Primaris are a little bit bigger, which they are considered to be quote-unquote true scale, what a real Space Marine would look like. It's always been weird if you put like a human guardsman right next to an Astartes model. They're basically the same height, where Astartes are supposed to be these 8.5-foot tall killing machines. It just didn't look like it was to the correct scale.
Right.
So you're at an interesting point where if you're starting an army now, you can just build everything in Primaris Marines and they're all the correct scale. I'm in a situation where I have a whole bunch of old Astartes models. When you look at my Primaris models next to my Astartes, you're like, well, what are these mini Marines doing there? So for me, my army, I'm segregating Primaris from Astartes. So if I'm going to start a new army, if I'm going to add Primaris that came in the Indominus box set that's right there, they have to be their own faction. They cannot be part of my army because the two don't mix. So I have to paint those in a new.
And that's the funny thing to me, because you guys talk about all of that, and that's the thing I care the least about.
Right, right.
Like for me, I have I don't get that emotional connection. Because number one, probably because I don't know the story, but number two, it's like I just want to put models on the table and play and have fun.
Yeah, and you could care less whether these ones are smaller than those ones. Yep, no, I totally understand. For me, it's not necessarily a story thing. It's an ethic thing. I don't know. For me, it's a.
No, I get it. I totally get it, and
I still think the Primaris Marines are stupid. I still think their addition to the stories is stupid. I understand how they're tying them in. I just think they're dumb. Like the idea that Belisarius Cawl came along and improved on the Emperor's design and made Space Marines only better 10,000 years ago, and poof, here they are, feels weird to me. It's a feels weird part of the lore story. So I don't necessarily dislike Primaris Marines, but I don't trust them.
So the good thing about that, Ed, is because you're so out of date on the novels and stuff, you're actually just out of touch. If you were up to date, I think you might feel slightly differently.
Yeah, maybe.
Because it goes a lot.
I finished Avenging Sun.
No, what I mean is the Horus Heresy stuff. So it goes a lot in the later books into the creation of the Primarchs and the creation of the Astartes and who did the work, and the Siege of Terror series. So if you read Sons of the Selenar, is a good one. That's got a decent amount of stuff about the creation of the actual Space Marine legions.
Ooh, all 20 of them?
No, but just the one. There weren't even. So this is it. The pre-Dark Angels. They're not the first legion because they're just all there is.
They're not Thunder Warriors then. It's not.
No, it's a transition from. I'll not spoil it too much, but it's a transition from Thunder Warriors into Astartes, and how the Emperor solidifying the seat of power on Terra. That's a lot of that stuff is in. I forgot the guy's name now. Who's the Adeptus Custodius? Valdor. Constantine Valdor. I think it's just called Valdor. The novel.
Interesting. But anyway, that's getting a little off the beaten path on what Sean wanted to get into, because he had questions.
Okay, so
from a new perspective. So
I got to start this out. So the hard part for me to totally understand is, so in the codex, when I look at the beautiful codex that I have, it has, I believe, all the Space Marines that are legal to play. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
for generic Space Marines.
Space Marines, right? Because they have the different
sub-factions. Yeah, sub-factions of each individual Space Marine Legion. Correct. So, for example, you have the Ultramarines book, which is a sub-faction of generic Space Marines.
So like what I have right now is I have the box of guys that are in Phobos armor. And then I have the intercessors, which are in a different type of armor.
Yeah.
And then I have the captain, who's in a different type of armor. And they're all in the book. I found them all in the book.
Yeah, so there's nothing that disallows them being played together. Yeah, it was more of so the way I see it in my head when I picture how it would work, and it's partially from being in the military, I suppose, is that when you go to stores and get your armor, they're not going to go like, well, you're slightly better at this, so you can have this style of armor. You can have it's like, this is the armor we've got in stock today, boys. Off you pop.
You're getting. Yeah. No, I totally get it. But that's one of the things, so basically the box of heavy intercessors doesn't matter if it matches the combat Vanguard box.
No.
So that's kind of the big thing right now with me.
The only thing that you're going to get from the perspective of what the armor itself looks like is to ensure that your army is painted in a fairly uniform manner. So, for example, you're doing Ultramarines, it's going to be anticipated that you're going to do ultramarine blue as the primary color throughout.
Right. And
what type of armor they're building or what weapons they're carrying is genuinely irrelevant to that.
So, okay, so I'm looking at Amazon right now, and they have Primaris Hellblasters.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if I got that, there's no issue using them
None
with my vanguards or anything else.
No. So what we should probably do is talk about a little bit about how 40K armies are constructed. Yeah. And this gets into like the force organization charts that they fall into. So do you have your core rulebook out of curiosity? Did you have
No, it has the PDF version.
No,
okay, you did get one. You did get it.
Perfect. Yeah. Hold on. Yep. We're gonna go do okay, children, turn to page X. So the first thing you're going to want to take note of, and that is going to be, I would like you to turn to page 248.
This battle detachments.
This is going to describe what an attachment is. And an attachment is how an army in 40K is constructed. So in the upper left-hand corner of the data sheet for each of your Warhammer 40K units is going to be a symbol. It's either going to be a skull, which represents an HQ unit. It's going to be a little triangle, which represents a troop unit. A little skull and crossbones that represents an elite.
This is something my son and I were talking about that we didn't totally understand.
Yep, and we'll get this for you. The lightning bolt is for fast attack. This is for the listeners at home. The little explosion.
It's okay. I'm about to throw it up on the screen.
The lightning bolt represents a heavy support, and then you have a little sword with wings that represents flyers. You also have other ones like super heavy detachments, but we'll get to that. So when you're building an army, you want to build into one of these detachments. So, for example, for as small as an army that you and your son are going to have, I would look at something called a patrol attachment. Now, the reason for that is the box set that you bought is a combat patrol. It's meant to fit into this force organization chart.
Okay.
So that one in the upper hand left, the very top on page 248 is a patrol detachment. It says that you are required to have a minimum of one HQ unit and one troop unit. Those are the ones that are listed in red. All of those other ones.
It's up to your right, Ed, if you just want to point at it, you know.
Oh, that would be up here.
Yeah.
All of the other slots that are listed in gray are considered to be optional. So you can have up to from 1 to 2 HQ units in your army. You can have up to 1 to 3 troop units. You can have 0 to 2 elites, 0 to 2 fast attack, 0 to 2 heavy support, and 0 to 2 flyers. That is how you build your army. So, for example, the box set that you got, let me pull that exact box set up, because I think that came with a lieutenant, which falls into the HQ slot. Where is it? Space Marines control product. Perfect. Okay. So you came with Primaris Lieutenant Phobos armor is going to fall into your HQ slot. The 10 Primaris infiltrators, I think infiltrators fall under their troop selection. Suppressors are falling into the fast attack slots. Your eliminators are falling into your elite slot. And then the impulsor is a transport. Dedicated transports are pretty much freebies as long as they can be attached to another unit. So what you have there fills almost one of every slot. You have one HQ in there, you have one troop, you have one elite, you have one fast attack, and then you have a dedicated transport that you can put your troops in. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So when you're looking to build additions, when you're looking at what can I add to this? Look at these individual detachments. So where you have an opening is you have no heavy support right now, currently. Now you did get heavy intercessors. That's a troop choice as well.
Yep.
So when you look at the units in your codex and you go, ooh, these look cool, what do those fit into? You'll be able to say, oh, if I want to fit them into my patrol, I only have one more slot that I can fit another elite in. So I want to pick the one elite that I want to add into that. I only have one more fast attack slot that I can fit into there. but I have 2 heavy supports that are wide open that I can fill in 2 additional units that can fit in there. So that's how those are constructed. Now,
so I do have okay. So before we carry,
stop me, because otherwise I'm just going to keep going on.
So we have the detachment, and then we have the different types of. Would you call them units, or what do you call those? So
those are force organization slots.
Okay, so what determines how many elites in that 0 to 2 that I can have? Is that coming
one
out of
squad.
the codex?
Yeah, so 1 codex entry. So if you go to your Space Marine codex, it'll be broken down into HQ.
So hold on. Let me. So I'm not really looking at HQ because I get that it's usually 1 guy.
Yeah.
So like here, I opened up the scout squad.
Scouts, I think, are
they're troops.
Troops?
144.
Yep, those would be troops, and you can tell that because in that little symbol right next to the picture of the model is no, they're elites. I was going to say I thought they were elites.
So
okay, so they're elites. Okay, so what makes up a unit of these is having 4 to 9 scouts and 1 sergeant.
Yeah,
or is it just
no?
So you have to have the sergeant.
Correct.
Yeah.
The sergeant's a requirement for that unit, and then you can have up to 4 to 9 additional scouts.
So basically, 4 to 10 is what the unit size is.
It's 5 to 10.
5 to 10. Yeah, 5 to 10.
And think of it this way: so for especially Space Marines, it's going to be really easy. Usually, Space Marines is a very regimented kind of thing. So each individual squad has a squad leader, and then other guys that fall under him. So for this particular entry, you've got.
I don't know.
Yeah,
heavy intercessors. Okay, perfect. So let's go to their entry on.
So if you open that box up, Sean, you would be able to build either a sergeant and 4 or 5 normal. And
so the reason, because that answers my next question was, so basically when they sell their stuff, they're selling it so you could legally put it on the table.
Yeah.
They don't do what Fantasy Flight does or what they did, where you had to buy 3 cores to have a viable game to play type thing. So this 5 troop unit here that I have has the one sergeant or leader, and then the 4 other units.
So generally for Space Marines, the box gives you the minimum number.
Okay.
And then you buy 2 boxes if you want to do a maximum.
And then you just turn the sergeant guy into another troop.
Yeah, there'll be a helmet option or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a helmet or an arm swap or something like that. It says, ooh, and you'll see it whenever you look at the instructions, whenever you're building the model, it'll say, hey, you can build a sergeant with this, or you can build this regular base guy.
Because that was what was confusing me. But now that I see it and talking to you, it actually makes complete sense that 4 to 9 with the leader underneath. So the next thing is when I'm looking at this book, the Space Marine book, I'm looking at weapons. So they have, and I just turn to random pages always because that's
go ahead, pick one. We're following along home.
Let me find one. Golly, I keep finding things that are like single and stuff. Blade Guard Veteran Squad. So page 150.
Great unit, by the way.
So when I look at that, I can have 3 to 6 units or 3 to 6 models in that unit, and then I can build them out any way I want with weapons, or is it you're going to have certain amounts in each one?
So if you read further down, it should tell you the weapon options that they come with as standard. If you keep going, I don't have it. I'll have to go and open mine.
Yeah, so it says weapon.
You said Blade Guard Veteran Squadron?
Yeah, page 150.
Yeah, so you get 1 Blade Guard Veteran Sergeant and then 2 to 5 Blade Guard Veterans.
Right. Okay, so the next box down is what's confusing me.
Well, hang on, but there's a line above that next one. So what it says for those, it says for this unit, if this unit contains 4 or more models, it has a power rating of 10. Skip past that for a moment. The next line says every model is equipped with a heavy bolt pistol, a mastercrafted sword, frag grenades, crack grenades, and storm shield. When you get down to that box where it says weapons, all those other weapons,
just describing what they have.
Those are things that you can switch out for, and it'll give you the point stars for what you can change out for. So I think actually the Blade Guard Veteran Squads is probably a bad example because it doesn't look like they have many options. Because it looks like the Neo Volkite pistol is for the sergeant.
But that's a good way of doing it because you don't overwhelm him with.
Yeah, okay, that's true.
Lines to read.
So, all right.
So the only way you can build these, if you look at the picture at the bottom, Sean, where it's got the Black Templar, the Ultramarine, and the White Scar one.
Yep.
So the only options you have is in the War Gear options bullet point. The Blade Guard Veteran Sergeant's heavy bolt pistol can be replaced with one of the following: one Neo Volkite pistol or one plasma pistol. So that's that guy. The Ultramarine Sergeant in the center is holding the Volkite pistol.
Okay.
So you could build him with one of 3 different pistols, but all of the others would just have swords and shields, and then the guns would be in the holsters.
As they were meant to be.
Okay, so then in the box, will it come with the 3 different?
So
generally it should, but not all boxes have all options. So in that sense, sometimes it might be like you're thinking of having to buy an A-wing to get push limits.
Right.
But
so you have to buy extras. Okay.
You don't.
For Primaris, though, if he's building Primaris, I don't think he's going to genuinely have that problem.
But the other thing as well is if you built that sergeant with a sword in his hand, and then the pistol was in the holster.
Okay.
What pistol is it? It's Schrodinger's pistol. It's a pistol you need it to be at any time you like.
Yeah.
Which could be the bolt pistol, the Neo Volkite.
Correct.
Because every model carries those.
Correct.
Yeah,
and then you're choosing which weapon you're using each turn to shoot.
Well, so you obviously when you make your list, you'd pick which weapon the guy has. But generally, there's a rule in Warhammer called WYSIWYG, which is an acronym for what you see is what you get.
Right.
So if he's holding, if a model is holding a Volkite pistol, that model has to have a Volkite pistol. If he's holding a sword,
that was the question I was going to ask. Now,
that's for tournament play in an official event.
Correct.
If you're playing against me or Ed or your son, it doesn't fucking matter. Build what looks cool.
Right.
Yeah, but I can't tell you the number of Space Marines that I have that have Meltagun, that have a flamer, that have my sergeant.
So you can change them out, right?
Right, because let's say the meta says right now that sergeants with Power Fist are really, really good. So I have 3 sergeants that have Power Fist, but then Power Fist go up to 50 points and all of a sudden they're not viable. Now I have 3 sergeants that have chain swords because that's cheaper and easier option. So it starts to get to that point. That's where people will start like magnetizing sometimes those to be able to swap the arms out of them. Don't go that route. Right now, all I would focus on is play with what looks cool and what it has fun with. What you do need to keep in mind, though, is that on some of those, there are points associated with those. So, for example, where it says the Blade Guard veterans can swap out his heavy bolt pistol for a Neo Volkite pistol, if you're playing for power, that's going to add 1 more power to your list. If you're playing for points, the Neo Volkite pistol is an additional 10 points on top of the sergeant. So it's just like adding an upgrade in X-Wing, where I can get this, but I have to pay the points to get to it.
So really quick, where does it say that?
So the points are right at the back.
Yeah. The points
so if I go to the back, I've seen that.
But where the line that
profiles of each one. Yeah.
Right. Well, even further back. So if you go further back, I think it is, if you look back to page 202, you're going to start seeing the point values for things. Now, I will tell you ahead of time that is out of date, because Games Workshop does this thing where they like to rebalance their game every year and they adjust point costs for things. And they put out the chapter approved book that gives you adjusted point values.
Okay.
For, like, let's say, for example, this particular unit's doing really, really well. They clearly undercosted it. They're going to bump up that unit by 15 points. The chapter approved will basically errata that unit to going up or down in points.
Okay.
For you guys, if you're not playing at a tournament level, don't worry about that. Just play with what's the point values that are in the book. Don't concern yourself.
That's the biggest thing for us is we're never going to play. I don't ever plan on playing in any
never
tournament, in any game. You know,
then play at power level and never worry about it.
That's what Chris was telling me, is worry about power level more so than points. Ultimately, though, you could just do it either way. I mean, it doesn't really, as we become more understanding, points kind of makes it a little more intriguing because it's variability.
Well, and points becomes a little bit more balanced. And so the reason for that, whenever point level was originally introduced, there are ways, technically the way the rules are written for power level, it's whatever the models have, that's what they have. Okay. So there were people that could actually squeeze. So I think it's 50 points. 50 power level is basically the pseudo equivalent to 1,000-point army. But there were people that could actually squeeze in a 1,500-point army just by modifying and changing things based on their models, and they don't adjust the power level anyway. So you could game the power system if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's not something that you're going to need to worry about. I think we mentioned when we're chatting about the granularity of it. You're effectively playing with, if you imagine it as a couple of the decimal points moved up a little bit.
Right. Exactly.
Instead of playing in a 1,000-point game, you're playing, as I said, a 50-point game. Right. So if something's worth 50 points more, it's worth like 0.5 more. You can't change that because it doesn't exist. But 50 points adds up if you keep doing it.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes total sense, because that's something that my son and I are trying to figure out, is how to play. I think he wants to play more points. I've discussed, because I like that, the X-Wing card where you just throw it down. These are the ships you play, and this is what the power
what I would advise, you will eventually just go to point strong, because it's the way that 99% of people in the world play. What I was saying to you about power level is, while you're learning the game, that's the best way to do it, because that means that you two can play because you've got an equal power level. If you add up the points for Araman on a disc, 10 Rumeric Marines, and I can't remember what the other thing is that's in that box, but the points will be drastically different. So suddenly you don't have equal forces anymore.
Yeah, so I understand that.
And obviously you guys have bought more stuff anyway, so it's not really relevant. But
yeah, I mean, but if to start out, we're just going to do the box. I'm not going to do the vehicle.
Yeah,
because we're looking at the Vanguard box compared to this 1,000 Suns box. We're the equalizer. The vehicle, and it may not change it much. It just might give me an advantage to something. We don't know yet because we've never played. But that's the thing. So with that said, then how often do they update this stuff? Like the codexes, how often?
The codex comes out generally once per edition, and the points are changed.
Unless you're Space Marines, then you get it twice.
Not really. I think there's more editions that have only had one.
I know. He's correct. There was one edition where they got Space Marines got a 2.0, which was 8th edition that they got.
Was that just a balancing piece, or what was that?
It was supposed to be, but it became the premier codex. It was grossly overpowered, and everybody was playing it.
Because that's the problem that we had with Warhammer Fantasy, was that when I was playing 10 years ago, was the fact that they would do an army and a codex, and only one army and one codex at a time. Mm-hmm. They would update it.
Just to clarify, so by updating as far as printed material, I would agree with Chris in the fact that once per edition, you're probably going to get one book. So for example, my Necron book that came out whenever 9th edition came out is probably not going to get updated again during the course of 9th edition. Where they make their updates after the printed edition comes out is with that chapter approved, where they adjust point values.
And that comes out every year.
And they do that every year.
Yeah, it's a book you can buy. It's like 15 bucks or something from memory for you, I think. Is it 15?
So
it's going to look like this. Don't get this one because the 2021's due out on Saturday.
Yeah, it comes out tomorrow.
What this is going to do is this actually contains 2 books. The first book that's in chapter approved is going to be all of the missions that are approved for tournament play. I wouldn't worry so much about this. The one that you're looking for is this book on the inside, which is called the Mutatorium Field Manual. And literally all this is points adjustments.
Okay.
It goes through every unit of the game, every weapon in the game, and says this is the new points for 2021.
Yeah. So that answers that, because the questions I have are.
Yeah, that's what I meant whenever I said your already printed Space Marine Codex is now going to be 2 points changes behind, starting on Saturday when they reprint this for the year 2021.
That makes sense, and we can pick that up, and if we're playing by points, and it will help both Aaron, myself, and his friends understand that too. Correct. I'm glad you brought that up, because if we don't understand those things. The next question I have is, okay, so gameplay. So this isn't a everybody kills everything type game, right? This is a you have a scenario with objectives and that type of thing. Is that how the game is played?
So it's probably easier if I pull that book right back out. So yes, in short, missions are designed to have physical objectives on the board, and it is broken down into primary and secondary objectives. The primary objectives are usually those physical objectives on the board. If you hold them for so long, X, Y, and Z amount of time, you get so many points. Full game, the absolute maximum amount of points that you can get in 9th edition is 100 points.
Okay.
So you can get 45 points for your primary objective. You can get 45 points for your secondary objectives, and then you get an additional 10 points at the end for having a fully painted army. So in the beginning, I would just give everyone that extra 10 points.
Right. Yeah,
don't do it, Sean. Don't do it. Paint yours first.
Or you could do that.
Well, I hold the primer, so right now I have that advantage.
So I'm going to grab a random mission out of chance. So for example, I'm looking at a mission, and it gives you the deployment on where each player deploys.
So that reminds me of Rune Wars.
Yeah, and these little circles here are where you put the physical markers. Poker chips work. They're supposed to be 40 millimeter bases. What I did is these, which are vinyl objective markers, because it's a distance from the center that you have to stand to hold an objective. So these are great because you can just toss them on the table, and if any model that touches this is within that range of that objective mark. But you can use poker chips work just fine.
Okay.
So each mission is going to tell you what the primary is. So for example, the one that I just showed you, if you hold one or more objective marker, you get 5 points. If you control 2 or more objective markers, you get 10, 3 or more, you get 15. You score that at the end of every single turn, except for the first. Okay. So over the course of the game, for your primary objectives, you can build up to a grand total of 45 points. Once you hit that 45 points, you stop. You can't gain any more after that.
So is that so confusing? No. It actually that part makes sense. So killing models isn't the primary goal. Killing models is a secondary effect to objective-based game.
Correct, but they can also be secondary objectives. So, for example, in the core rulebook, I feel like this is library time. Okay, in the core rulebook, they will describe mission values, and that is going to be. Give me 1 second. So that is that. Where does it give secondary objective? It's right after this. That's that. Not there. That's using stratagems and strategic reserves. As actions, we'll get to that. Terrain features, terrain traits. Match play. Perfect. So on page 284, each player gets to select 3 secondary objectives, 1 from each type. So you can do 1 from Purge the Enemy, 1 for No Mercy, No Respite, 1 for Battle Supremacy. So for example, Purge the Enemy, the very first secondary it's an end game objective, and you score 3 victory points at the end of each battle round for every character you kill. So there are secondary missions specifically out there saying, hey, if I killed your Phobos lieutenant or your lieutenant in Phobos armor, I get 3 points for that.
Okay.
And again, there's 45 points to be had on those secondary objectives. So if you're playing against an army that runs a lot of characters, and they will have the character keyword written in their rules in their data sheet, you can go and killing those is worth points. Okay. So while I agree with you from the primary perspective, killing models is kind of a secondary part of the game to holding those primary objectives. There's still a whole second half to that scoring, which are those secondary objectives, which can be how many tanks do you kill? How many monstrous creatures do you kill? How many, like there's one, what's the one that I'm thinking? Slay the Warlord's my favorite. If every one of your armies has a quote unquote warlord, he's the leader, you get bonus points if you kill the leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's great. But there's one that's like designed for, it's like thin their ranks. There it is. If you select this objective, keep a tally of kill points. Each time an enemy model is destroyed, add 1 point to the tally. So the more models you kill, the more points you score in your secondaries. So at the end of every battle round, you're going to add up at the end, how much of this did I do? That's how many points I scored in that round. And every game is 5 rounds. So at the end of 5 rounds, every round, how many did I get here? How many did I get here? How many did I get here?
Okay.
Until you get to the total at the
end. Okay, so the next question is, so let's say I have the heavy intercessors on the board. I don't know where they are in the book, but I have the heavy intercessors on the board, and I have 10 of them. And I'm just using them as an example. But so they have 5 wounds. Okay. Let's just say that they had 5 wounds. Is that per model or is that just per
model?
So yeah, it's per model. Although I think heavy intercessors actually have 3 wounds, don't they?
Yeah, I'm just throwing an arbitrary number out there because I'm not on their page. So
they are. I just blew past them because they are in the troop choice for reasons. Yeah. So each heavy intercessor has 3 wounds.
So they're in that part, Ed. So you can do what I said, which is make an army list of that type of armor. Yeah. So each type of armor needs its troop choice.
You're right.
Literally no other reason.
I know. So that's page 141 on your Space Marine Codex, by the way.
Okay. So, and that's determined by the type of armor they have?
So it's all power armor in the book. It's all the same. But is it all the same? Or am I just lying now?
So for your Space Marines, it's based on the type of unit.
Yeah.
So if you look at other armies, like, so for example, my Necron Warriors, they have 1 wound. They have 1 wound because they're only smaller units. They're 12 points, 13 points each. Your heavy intercessors are like 28 points each. So you're paying for the extra wounds, which means that they're tougher. They can take more damage before they finally die or are taken off the field.
They're also slower.
Only they are also
speed. Yeah. They're the movement. Yeah, I saw a lot of that, and that'll depend on what type of unit you have for movement and stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's one of the things I love that 8th edition brought back. Was way back in the day in 2nd edition 40K, each individual model had its own movement rating. In 3rd edition, they tried to streamline things. Vehicles move 12 and units move 6. But it didn't make sense that certain units are like there's no way to represent how fast like a model is on the field. Like, why is this guy the same speed as that guy? So yeah, right. Each individual unit has their own movement speed, which is measured in inches with a tape measure.
So if you attack me and you do 5 wounds, that means I take 1 model off the table.
So, all right, before we get to that, so we need to kind of talk about the entire combat round. So,
okay.
When you're looking at that stat line, you're looking at heavy intercessors. So let's look at that entire stat line and what those numbers mean. So M, obviously, you have figured out his movement that is represented in the inches. And just for the record, to make sure that you build the habit correctly, it is from base to base. So, for example, if you put your tape measure at 5 inches on the back of your Space Marine model, and you've got the front of your base going to that 5-inch mark, the front of your base needs to go to the end. You don't get to get the extra inch, half an inch on that, because so it's not front to back. It's like whatever you measure from is the same thing you measure from the beginning. So if I'm measuring from the front here, I'm measuring from the front up there.
Right.
Just It's one of my nitpicky little things that people always pull up.
Yep.
The next thing that comes up is weapon skill. Weapon skill represents your hand-to-hand combat abilities.
Okay.
These are all done on D6s. And what that means is that your Space Marine heavy intercessors, if they're fighting in close combat, hit on a 3+. So you roll 8 dice or however many attacks you're rolling. Everyone that's a 3 and higher is a hit. Everything that's a lower is a miss.
Okay.
Ballistic skill, same thing. Everything that's a 3 and higher is a hit. Everything that's a 1 or a 2 is a miss.
And ballistics is ranged.
Right, exactly. Is shooting.
Okay.
The S represents strength. That is physically how strong that model is. That is usually only used in close combat. We'll get to that on what it basically determines how easy it is for you to wound the model that you're attacking.
Okay.
T represents toughness. That's how physically tough you are and how easy you are to go off of wounds. It makes things more difficult for you to be wounded based on that number. W represents the number of wounds. That is the amount of damage that you can take before a model falls and dies. A represents attacks. That is, again, physical hand-to-hand attacks. That does not translate to ballistic attack. So, for example, your heavy intercessors are armed with executioner bolt rifles. That doesn't mean that you get to fire that weapon twice because the model has 2 attacks. You get to shoot once. Those attacks are in physical hand-to-hand combat.
Okay.
LD represents your leadership. That's how prone you are to staying into the fights. You know, if you fail a leadership role, you start taking attrition and start losing models. And the save is what you save if someone tries to wound you and do damage to you. That is the number that you need to roll to have your armor shrug off that wound.
Gotcha.
So a basic attack would be, I'm shooting you with my Necron Warriors that hit on a 4+. I've got 10 of them, and they're firing into your squad of 5 heavy intercessors. They hit on a 4+. So I roll 10 dice, and 5 of those dice hit. I then pick those dice up that are hits, and I'm trying to do wounds. Your toughness is 5. So this starts getting into if the toughness and strength of a weapon are the same, it is a 4+ to do a wound. If my strength is 1 above but not double your toughness, I wound on a 3+. If my strength is double your toughness or more, I wound on a 2+. And that goes the opposite way too. So for example, your toughness is 5, my Necron Warriors are firing at a strength 4. I actually need 5s to wound you.
Because you take off 1 because of the difference.
Right, because you're tougher than my guns are shooting at.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, if it's the same, it's 4s. If it's better, it's 3s. If it's a lot better, it's 2s. If it's a lot worse, it's 6s. If it's a little bit worse, it's 5s.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that comes off of the S on the weapon.
Yeah.
The S on the weapon. Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
So, of those 5 dice, I'm going to pick them up and only 2 of them wound because I needed 5s. Because I needed 5s to wound you. So you now have 2 wounds that you need to allocate to some model on your board. So you're going to pick up 2 dice and you're going to roll dice for saves. You save on a 3+, and you roll a 5 and a 6. You shrug off both of those wounds. Let's take that exact same scenario and say that you fail those rolls. You roll a 1 and a 2. So you have 2 wounds. So you need to pick one model in that unit and allocate those 2 wounds to. You keep allocating wounds to a single model until it dies and then move on to the next one.
Okay, so you can't do it across
10
models. So it's basically your hit points are the models. So
what about Ed, if it was a unit of Arc bikes and each one of them had a different weapon option?
And 5th edition. How I miss the. Oh. That's how it was done in 5th edition. If each model was equipped differently, you had to allocate wounds differently. So there were people that gamed the system. They did the same thing with Thunderwolf Cavalry. They did the same thing with. There was another exploit on that. But point being is basically you kept going, I go wound here, a wound here, a wound here, a wound here. So basically you had to do like 20 wounds before you killed a single model. It was fucking joke. They fixed that in 6th edition. No more of that. You need to keep allocating wounds to a single. And once you've started allocating wounds, you have to keep allocating wounds to that model until it dies. But what it does, it allows you to kind of shield a model. So let's say, for example, your sergeant had a really, really cool gun and you want to keep him in the game. You can kill off all of his buddies until he's the last model standing.
That was my next question.
Lead from the front.
Lead from the front, but duck.
So with that, that's where the leadership rating comes in.
So leadership comes in the last phase of the game. So the game works in phases. So the beginning phase is the command phase. That's where there's a lot of stuff that you'll see in the Space Marine code that says in your command phase you can do X, Y, or Z. You also get an additional command point. Command points are used on these things called stratagems, which are little in-game advantages that you can give to yourself. Some of them are 1 command point to do this.
I think you're shooting too deep now, Ed, for the question of what leadership's for.
Okay, fair argument. Leadership is so the last phase at the end of a phase. You have to take at the end of your turn. You have to take a leadership check. If you've taken wounds that turn. You basically roll.
So it's wounds. It's wounds.
Yes.
So
is it wounds or is it deaths? Is it wounds or is it dead?
That was my question.
I don't know. You'll have to look because I don't have my robot with me. It's over there.
And when you said that, I think that it is actually dead models. I think it's actually models that have died.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now that you've said that out loud, all these pretty pictures. Oh, look at that! I put this little ribbon there for the rules. Psychic. I do believe it is dead models, not. Morale test. Okay. Starting with the player whose turn it is. Players alternate taking morale test. If the player has 1 or more units that have taken morale test, blah, blah, blah. Destroyed models this turn. It is not wounds, it's destroyed models. Yeah. So you actually have to lose a model to have to take a morale check. How you take a morale check is you roll a d6 plus the number of models that you lost.
That died. If it beats your leadership, you have to take attrition. Attrition says you lose an additional model, which that's the guy that says, screw you guys, I'm going home. So that's just 1 model you're losing.
Well, that's 1 model plus in addition to whatever
you lost during combat.
Correct. You'll find that on page 233 on your main rulebook and how that's explained.
Okay. Because that was another question him and I both had was about that. Because
one of the things I love about the layout on this is you can read all the minutia if you want, but if you just read those bullet points that they have set out there, they basically explain it in very short terms. Like, here's the long answer, but here's the short answer.
Okay, so let's say I have 9 heavy intercessors in the sergeant. Do I roll for the 9 intercessors and then the sergeant?
No, but you take the highest leadership from the unit.
So if the sergeant's in the unit, I'm rolling at an 8, not a 7. Okay, correct. That makes sense.
And that's the reason why you have leaders to do that. Leaders will help bump up your leadership like that.
Right. Okay. That actually answers the question about, I know the leaders have, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole or even near it right now, but leaders have special abilities. Things like that. So really quick. So I have this
like your aura that you have on your lieutenant.
Yeah. So like I have the captain here.
Mm-hmm.
Does he go in a unit or does he stay by himself?
So he is a unit in and of himself, but he also has the special role of character. characters cannot be singled out by themselves if there are other units around them. So usually what a character will do is he is usually a buff for other units. So he'll have another unit near him. And that character role is... That's what the glossary's for. Why is that not here? Where's their index? Index! Characters, CH. I go casualties and it goes into there. So character rules are going to fall under reinforcements. It's going to fall into the shooting phase, second phase, shooting phase. Axe, locked combat, assault pistol, blah, 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 blah. Look out, sir. Models cannot target any character model with wounds 9 or less with a ranged combat weapon if it's within 3 inches of another friendly model. So as long as your characters are staying within 3 inches of another unit, they can't be singled out. If they're all alone, empty on the battlefield, they're bullet monkeys.
That makes sense because, just because of the cost of these guys. And like I said, I don't want to go into special abilities because that just...
Right
now it's just understanding. So basically that special unit, the captain, wouldn't be
able to be shot
if he's within 3 inches of one of my heavy intercessor models.
Correct.
So
that rule is going to be on page 219, and that's under...
Yeah, I'm already there with that. So with that said, then, so he's within 3 inches of a unit or of a model that's a part of a unit. So I'm still pulling off that unit rather than giving him damage. That's basically what that...
Well, no. So in short, he can't even be targeted.
Oh, okay. So it's... you literally shoot him.
Well, you have models in there that break that rule, the eliminators that are actual snipers that can actually target characters. So just like everything in X-Wing, like there's a rule and there's something that can break a rule that's in the game. Generally, unless he is the closest model to the unit shooting at him, they cannot shoot him. It's against the rules to shoot at him. They have to shoot at the heavy intercessors because they have no choice but to. So it's not a question of him peeling off wounds to them. Like he's literally peeling off shots. Like people physically can't shoot him. Unless you have a unit like your eliminators that are allowed to target characters, whether or not they're the closest models or not.
Okay. That makes sense there because, that was one of the things that was perplexing me. And I hadn't caught that rule in here, but it's like, why would you put a character down because they're just going to die, because... Well,
so the reasons for it, you're right, because they would die really quick. But the reason for it is usually characters, unless they're...
they have special abilities that either buff or do the command thing. Exactly. That's why I don't want to get that far into that because that's just too deep for my tired brain tonight. But
yeah, exactly. But... think of it, they are a buffing unit that you want to have close to your other units so that their aura ability is buffing them.
Right.
And the reward for doing that is they're basically protected from small arms fire and being able to be singled out except in special occasions.
Right. And this is where the confusion I get into is with Legion, and because that's the last miniatures game I played was Legion, where it's very similar. They have a lot of similarities. The unit cohesion and all that type of thing has some similarities, but the leadership side is where it kind of just, we'll figure that out as we go. And I'll ask you guys questions as we have questions about how the total leadership piece works and stuff.
It's a little confusing, but once you've read over it once or twice, you'll get it. Well, the first time you have to start taking models off the board going, okay, I lost 4 models here. I need to roll a D6. There's my 4. My leadership says, did I pass my leadership? If I did, great, nothing happens. If I didn't, then I need to find out what happens. How many models do I lose? But
is it the leadership of the unit, or is it the leadership of that character that you're going off of?
Some characters have aura abilities that spread their leadership onto those things. So, for example, right. So, for example, I believe your lieutenant actually doesn't. He doesn't. The captain, I think, might. The captain does.
Captain does.
The captain does.
Yeah, that's actually why I got him, because when I was looking at just some very basic stuff online, that was one of the things somebody said was get that captain or a little higher ranking ability. Like my librarians are going to be the psionic users or whatever you call it in this, right? They're the
psychers.
They're the psychers. So they're the ones using the brain power to do their stuff.
Correct. The space magic.
Yeah, the space magic. Yep.
But the upside is so like if you go back to that detachment thing that we talked about at the beginning, you now have a captain and a lieutenant. Mm-hmm. You have your 2 HQ units.
Got it. So the lieutenant will still count.
Yeah.
See, that didn't even register that I could have 2. You can
run a captain. You can run a lieutenant. You have your infiltrators, which are a troop choice. You now have your heavy intercessors, which are a troop choice. So you now have 2 HQ and 2 troop choices. You've got your psyker, which is going to fall into your elite slot. Yep. Your eliminators are going to fall into your elite slot as well. Your suppressors are going to be into your fast attack slots.
Yep.
You can see how it's like building Legos, but you only have so many of the good Legos. Like I can only put 2 HQ units, so I want to make sure the 2 HQ units I'm putting in there are really good. I can have a whole bunch of troops, but without a good leader, they're not going to be as good as they could be without a good leader on the field.
So the next piece is this, and I'm going to wrap it up here because we could go all night with this. And these are questions Aaron and I were asking back and forth that we didn't quite understand.
I don't recall telling anyone I was getting tired yet. We're talking 40K.
I know, you're wired from this.
There's a reason, Sean, that I said we should do it this way. It's almost like I know my audience.
Okay, so it says 2 CP. So to do the patrol detachment, I need 2 command points.
Correct.
It gives you 2 command points.
It gives me 2.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I can use the abilities, those special things. That's a rabbit hole I don't want to go down tonight either.
Well, I think it's something we could probably just touch on very, very
really quick. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Just
basically, the reason why it's structured that way is because the patrol is a smaller game. That having that formation gives you less command points because you don't want the command points to overwhelm the game. So you get one that you get every turn, plus you'll have 2 in the bank, kind of thing.
Oh, so it's two that you can use, and then.
They're finite, so you start with 2.
Yeah, with 2.
And then every turn,
you gain 1.
Every turn at the beginning of your turn in the command phase, the first thing that happens is you gain an additional command point.
But is it up to 2 or is it?
You can keep going.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But
if you spent no command points on one turn, you would have 3, and then on your next turn you'd go up to 4. You can go up to 5.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, and then obviously as you get a bigger formation, having more command points is less impactful, which is why the bigger formations give you more, but they also have a larger minimum requirement of troops you need to fill them.
Right. So it says here, Battle Forge command point bonus, gain 1 command point if army is Battle Forge.
Okay, so Battle Forge is Battle Forge is Games Workshop's way of preventing you from going, I'm going to take a Space Marine force and I'm going to take a Tyranid force. There's nothing
put them together.
Right. There's nothing in the rules preventing you from doing that.
Okay.
However, by doing so, you're not a Battle Forged army, and therefore you do not get those bonuses. So this is Games Workshop's little nudge in the direction of saying, you really want to play all Space Marines.
Okay.
Or you really want to play all.
That's where the keywords come at the bottom of each entry in the block, Sean. So where you're looking, if you look at your heavy intercessors again, they've got Angels of Death. Then they've got Primaris. Then they've got the armor types of the Mark 10 Garbus armor. And that's what I was saying about you can build the faction keywords. If your entire list shares the faction keyword, it's Battleforged. So generally,
if all of them have,
if you take it
Imperium,
from one book,
so Imperium or Adeptus Distaris chapter,
then you're Battleforged.
They're Battleforged. What about if they're infantry corps? Oh, I see. That's just the
doesn't work.
types
Doesn't
that they
matter.
are.
And so I want to make sure real quick. I want to make sure for the command points thing that's determined on the size of the battle that you're picking. So for you at Combat Patrol, it starts off at 3. If you wanted to get into like what would be considered quote unquote a standard game of 40K, which is about 2,000 points or 200 power, you start off with 12 command points.
Yeah, because it's
because
you're doing more in the game. Yeah,
the bigger the game
and
is,
you'll have more leaders too on the field.
Correct.
Or characters or whatever you want to call them. So really quick, I got to ask this question.
No, go ahead. Go.
This says faction keywords, Imperium or Adeptus Astaris. So are all of these going to be Imperium or Adeptus Astaris that are in
every one of them?
So the Imperium is the Imperium of Man. So all of the humans, whether you're in the Imperial Guard, your Sisters of Battle.
That's what I was just going to ask. So if I could actually pull units.
So I could pull units.
So right now I'm doing Ultramarines, but I could do, what is that, Adeptus Astaris?
Yep. Sisters of Battle. They're both Imperium. You can absolutely put these two together.
Really? So that's how you can mix and match a little bit outside of just having Space Marines. Because you used to be able to do that in fantasy.
Yep.
Like they would have.
It's what affectionately
you have 25% allies.
Yeah. Yep.
It's what is affectionately known as Imperial Soup, in the fact that I can take a whole bunch of ingredients that are all technically Imperium and put them together.
Gotcha.
Because they all share.
So that's what I really now like about this, because Space Marines, I want them to be my core, but it's cool to have other stuff down the line. Not today, of course, but 6 months from now, I might want something else that's a little different flavor.
Now, just so we're on the same page, so you know how that works. It can't be in the same. So it can't be in the same detachment. So remember we were talking about that Combat Patrol where you have like the 2 HQ, the 2 troops. Yep. Those all when you take a detachment, they all have to be from the same thing. You can take an additional detachment from something else that falls into and shares that keywords. So for example, you could do a Combat Patrol of Space Marines and you could do a Combat Patrol of Adeptus Sororitas. Because they both share the Imperium keywords, you're allowed to do that. But each of those has minimum requirements. So that would mean that you'd have to have a minimum of 1 HQ in the Space Marines and 1 HQ for the Adeptus Sororitas. 1 troop for the Space Marines, 1 troop for the Adeptus Sororitas before you can build anything else.
So you're saying... okay, that kind of confuses me.
I know.
So for the patrol detachment, I know we're way down the line, but so for patrol detachment, I would have to have 2 patrol detachments then. That meet the minimums.
What you'd do, Sean, the way it would generally work is if you were playing a 2,000 point game, say, normally you'd make a 2,000 point army by taking the next detachment up. I can't remember what it's called.
Battalion is usually
you take a battalion detachment and build your 1 army from your 1 book. If you wanted to, though, you could take 2 patrol detachments that are both 1,000 points, and that would be your army.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make more sense?
That's a better explanation.
A little bit, yeah. So
we could play a 2,000 point game. I would use my 2,000 point battalion detachment. You would use 2 1,000 point patrol detachments.
Gotcha.
2 different Imperial armies.
So really what these are talking about then, when I'm talking about patrol, battalion, brigade, vanguard, blah, all going down the line, those are just the restrictions I'm building, correct?
Yes.
That's just creating my restrictions, not... It's not really... So
those force organization charts are there to add a semblance of balance and
to the game.
Yeah.
Right, but it
by
also
restricting what you can take.
So it also opens up options for you, though. So, for example, if you took a battalion, which can take up to 3 HQ, but you really need that 4th HQ, you could take a battalion detachment that comes out to 1,850 points, and you can take a 150-point patrol that just has that other HQ that you needed in one piddly little troop choice because it meets the requirements.
So if you were going to be a min-maxing scumbag, Sean, you could do that.
Yeah, if you were going to be a douchebag, you can...
But I could do that, though. But I could do that with a battalion of Space Marines that are 1850, and then the sisters that are 150.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you'll bump into weird things with combat doctrine with Space Marines. So they give you this is 9th edition's version of you really want to play out of the same codex. So your army gets bonuses, which are called, for Space Marines, it's called combat
you'll
doctrine.
get to that on the rules page of Codex. It tells you, I'm paraphrasing, Ed, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically, if you take an army only from this book and they all share... Remember when you said about Adeptus Astartes chapter?
Yeah.
What that means is you are playing Ultramarines. So for your army, that would read Ultramarines. So instead of a word chapter, you're playing Adeptus Astartes Ultramarines. So you would get the bonus rules for Ultramarines if all of your army is just Ultramarines.
And that key phrase there is the chapter is the Ultramarines.
Yeah, it's whatever you want it to be. So, for example, in my Necron Codex, instead of where you see the word chapter, mine says dynasty. So whatever dynasty my Necrons are from, that they fit into that.
So with that said, then if I did do that where I mixed them, then I would lose whatever the bonus.
You would lose the combat. Yeah. Okay. Some people feel it's worth the risk for adding individual characters, but like that's one of the things at 9th edition that I really did like. If you're a Xenos player, you don't get to play in that sandbox that all these Imperial guys get to go, where they can go, oh, I can dip into the Astral.
I'm pretty sure you could do it with Elder. You've got Craftworld Elder. You've got
one race can pull it off. The Necrons can't do it, and the Tyranids can't do it. Well, I guess I can pull in Genestealer Cult. My Necrons can't do it. That's really what it gets down to, is my Necrons can't do it.
So, okay, that's about your Necrons.
My last question, and this is going to probably be a really softball one, but so I'm playing Space Marines Ultramarines, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron is playing Thousand Suns. What does he fall into?
Adeptus Hereticus, or what's the official chaos? Hang on, what's the official chaos?
But it's chaos, right? His is chaos.
This is chaos. This is while they are Adeptus Astartes, they're traitors.
Yeah. So Magnus did nothing wrong. No, sorry. No, you can, but you don't get any of those other bonuses, because remember, you can always just put whatever models you want on the table.
No, I understand that. I get that completely. But as far as if you're playing...
If you want any form of structure, the answer is no. If you don't care about structure and just want fun, the answer is yes.
Okay. That makes sense. Because
there's a specific rule in there that says open play. You can literally put whatever the hell you want on the table.
Yeah. Because the reason why I was asking that is because some of his models are Space Marine.
Yeah, but you don't know they didn't turn yesterday.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, I'm just classifying without going into lore fluff or anything like that. I'm just saying the reason why I asked that question was because he has Space Marines in his army. Now, I do understand
I think I've got the Death Guard book here. Let me check that.
Yeah, so fundamentally, the only difference between an Adeptus Astartes from the Imperium side and the Adeptus Astartes from the Chaos side are spiky bits.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately, inside the armor, it's the same guy.
I beg to differ. My Death Guard would...
Suns.
And also, the Thousand Suns, there's no one underneath the armor.
Yeah, there's the armor. Only. They're living armor.
That's what Rubric Marines, yes. There are still 1,000 Sons of Astartes.
Okay, so the way it works is his faction keywords should be Chaos, Tzeentch, Heretic Astartes, and then Thousand Sons.
So I couldn't mix and match with his.
Because the keywords for the Death Guard are Chaos, Nurgle, Heretic Astartes, Death Guard, and then Plague Company instead of where you have chapter, they get Plague Companies.
Okay. But if I had Chaos Space Marines, though, then they might cross paths.
Yes.
Yes. So the good rule of thumb is take one book, make an army from that book, take another book, make an army from that.
No. That's
exactly the exception would be if you read your Ultramarines, it's not a codex, it's a codex supplement, Ultramarines.
Right.
So it's meant to make in addition to the rules that are here, you also get to dig from that.
Which is why I waited to build anything to see if I needed to, because as you said earlier, but it doesn't really matter. But I want the models to represent as much as I can what they are. So if it has a bolter, I want it to have a bolter. If it has a sword, I want it to have a sword.
Right. Well, the upside for you for Astartes, for the most part, Space Marines are Space Marines. Like where you get your variation are your specialty squads.
Yeah.
So
I get that.
The sergeant, maybe the sergeant has this gun instead of that gun. Maybe he's got a power fist or he's got a power sword. Okay, so there's one model. But the rest of the guys are all bolter guys.
Yeah.
They've either got a bolt rifle or they're just bolter guys.
Right. Or you buy the unit that's a melee unit.
Right. And they're all either sword and board, Thunderhammer, Storm Shield, Terminators, or they're assault ones that got a bunch of guns.
And is that a different type of unit?
Yeah. The Terminator's got 2+ saves. They're awesome.
No. I don't mean that. I mean like models that you have to buy.
Yes.
Okay. What?
They're elites. You'll find assault Terminators as elites.
Assault Terminators.
You don't want any Terminators, Sean. Because they're not Primaris.
He doesn't care about that. I'm a gigantic fan
you'll find
of sword and board assault.
So Blade Guard veterans.
Blade Guard veterans. Yeah, you've already got 3 of those. You should probably
It doesn't have any. Yeah.
Oh.
So ultimately, so you're saying. So the purity is in the type of armor they're wearing. That's what you're talking about.
For me, it is.
For you.
Yeah, from a fluff perspective. Well, because
to me,
genetically speaking, Primaris Marines are different than Adeptus Astartes. They're both Adeptus Astartes, but Primaris are taller and bulkier.
The way I would explain it to you then, Sean, would be if we're playing America versus Russia and you're making your army list, Ed's talking about taking in a company level game, he's going to get 2 squads of Marines, then he's going to take some Delta, then he's going to have some Rangers, then he's going to have some Paras. And it doesn't matter, they're all from different services, because we're all on the same side, aren't they? It doesn't matter. Do what you want, man.
Right.
I'm saying that if you're going to play Marines, Sean, you play Marines. If you're going to play Paras, you play Paras. That's what I'm saying.
I firmly have mine separated too. I'm just saying from his perspective, this book does not restrict him from taking Adeptus Astartes squads, like standard tactical squads or intercessor squads. Nothing in the world says he can't take both.
I know.
So Adeptus Astartes, is that a type of unit or is that a type?
Adeptus Astartes. So you cannot copyright the name Space Marine.
They tried. Legitimately, they tried. That was the argument.
So you can copyright the term Adeptus Astartes. So they are used interchangeably.
That actually means Space Marine. Adeptus Astartes is
a Space Marine.
So by the fluff, if you were a commoner, you would say, "Oh, look at these Space Marines! They're amazing! Yay!" If you were in the know, you go, "Oh, look at these Adeptus Astartes! Aren't they amazing? Yay!"
Yeah.
So
and then
Vanguard,
you'd see Primaris go, oh wow, those guys are bigger.
So Vanguard, Space Marines, and Heavy Intercessors aren't the same. I know they're not the same unit, but
in the suits for Primaris.
So the person inside the armor could, like a captain, an Adeptus Astartes captain, if he was going on a recon mission, might wear Phobos armor. Then if his next mission was going to be like what room-to-room clearance, he might wear the Gravis armor. So it's picking the equipment that is suitable
based
for the battle. Yeah.
The physical guy in the side is still the same. The only fluff-wise, the only difference is the difference between a Primaris Marine and a standard Adeptus Astartes.
So it'd be really hard to make a Phobos armor Marine or Space Marines because there's only 7 units that you can choose from.
Same with the Gravis?
Generally, the size of game that I play, like 1,500, 2,000 points, I think you're fine. Remember, your vehicle support is irrelevant, so all of the transports and tanks and stuff is all going to be support anyway, as long as it's Primaris vehicles.
I was just gonna say, because Primaris cannot fit into a Rhino.
No, but I'm not going to take a Rhino. I'll take a hover Rhino or whatever they're called.
Yeah. What is it? The repulsor that you have? That's what that is. That's their equivalent of it.
I think it's not a repulsor. Is it one of you got? Because that's a big one. I think.
No. I got the primary impulsor.
Yeah, the repulsor's the flying land raider.
Oh, yeah. Right. You're right.
Yeah, the impulsor.
I know more about this than I thought I did, to be like 100% honest here. I thought I would sit and be quiet for most of this. But when you were looking up the range for characters, I'm sure it's 3 inches, but that could have been from like 2 editions ago, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, no, you were right.
But I'm not, because I didn't say anything. I didn't put myself out there to be wrong, so I can't claim to be right. You know?
Only after the fact.
After the fact. Convenient.
Okay. All right, I think I got enough for tonight. When the book comes tomorrow, that's when I'll start snipping and gluing, and then snipping, filing, and then gluing.
One last thing I want to mention: if you do decide to go out and get the chapter approved, the first pages to chapter approved is basically the rule book.
Okay.
So you legitimately have a mini version of the rule book in your hand, which I absolutely love. It's missing the parts about detachments. It's missing the parts about how to spend command points and the generic command points, but you'll find all of that in your main rule book.
And you're already bringing that to the table anyway.
Right.
Because you've already built that.
Correct. I think I would recommend going through, again, even if you just read the bullet points, I love the way that this book is laid out. Even if you just go through and read the bullet points, it'll take you, I don't know, half hour to go through those bullet points, and you'll be able to get an idea of how things work in the game. And then it'll start making more sense to you when it comes down to construction, because you've read the rules on what a detachment is. So now you know where the HQ goes in, and you can kind of see where, if I spend these command points, I know what a stratagem is, and I know what that can do in the game. If I spend 2 command points here, I can get my 1 unit to do this.
Right. Okay.
One of the other things,
Aren't you glad I split it into 2 shows, Sean?
I don't know if Chris got these or not, but each army also has a deck of these, which are all of the stratagem cards that you can spend. So they do all the generic, like the core rulebook comes with generic stratagems. The reroll one is usually the most common one that people use, but each army has their own. Bless you, I think.
Was that a burp and a sneeze at the same time?
Just coughing. Some COVID.
I was going to say, I thought 3 things happened there. But you can get these. I think these are like $20.
I've seen those.
Yeah, it has every single stratagem that you could spend command points on. Okay. Some command points some stratagems are very specific. If you have this unit here can do this for 1 command point. Some of them are more general. Any unit in your army can do Y.
Gotcha.
But these are nice to have because you'll have in mind the ones that you use over and over and again, and they can just literally put them in front of you. So you don't have to go flipping through the book and trying to find them here. Like, I can just flip through the cards. There it is. That's the one I'm going to use. What? I don't use these 5 units? Phew, take those over, toss them over my shoulder for now. I'm only going to grab the ones that are specific to the units that I use. Gotcha. Super, super helpful on the table.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, woo! I think I'm about as brain dead as I can get now.
Well, still available for questions. I'm not sure how much of that is going to stick the first time around, and legitimately, it's going to take some time to just getting it on the table. Just worry mostly about just getting on the table and rolling some dice.
Yeah,
figuring out like that's what ballistic skill means. That's what the hits. That's to wounds. Like at some point in time, it just starts becoming second nature. Like
it's just like any game. You got to play
like any game where you had to memorize a chart at one point in time, and then all of a sudden the chart's just in your head. You don't even think about it anymore. Yeah. That's the day to day, the meat and potatoes of the game. Moving models, shooting, doing damage, charging, close combat.
Right.
Then you have a whole bunch of other rules that are built into, well, this model does this and that model does that. But those are the basics.
Okay. Yep. I am going to enjoy this, I think. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of the Warhammer Fantasy. There's some flavor in that, between the two. A lot of dice rolling between the hits and before you take a model off, you roll a lot of dice, before you even have a chance to. Well, things like that, so...
Well, when you start getting into like, if you're like armies like the Tyranids, for example, and they're like, here, have a bucket of dice I'm going to throw at you. I only need 5s and 6s, but I rolled 60 dice. There's going to be 5s and 6s in there.
Yeah, it'll be like, hopefully I don't run into you pour 260 points into the Green Knight and you can't get him to spawn through the whole game until the last round because your dice suck and he needs a 4 to 6 and you're rolling 1 to 3s every freaking round.
Yeah, they kind of...
That never happened to me before.
Never, not one time.
No.
Yeah, they kind of phase that kind of stuff out of the game.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, guys. I'm pretty much wiped for this in focus.
Yeah, well, I'm going to start editing now.
Yay! Thanks everyone for listening. Bye!
Bye.